Welcome to RISE Professional Development. In this professional development module, you'll get an introduction to Bloom's taxonomy. You'll learn about the framework, action verbs, and sample questions. So let's get started. This professional development aligns with the TEA EC6 teacher standards, specifically Standard 7, which states that the mathematics teacher understands how children learn and develop mathematics skills, procedures, and concepts, knows how typical errors students make, and uses this knowledge to plan, organize, and implement instruction, to meet curriculum goals, and to teach all students to understand and use mathematics. The standard also states that the teacher should know and understand current theories, research, and practice on how students learn mathematics, and a variety of instructional methods, tools, and tasks that promote students' confidence, curiosity, and inventiveness while using mathematics described in the TEACs. The standard also suggests that the beginning teacher of mathematics is able to apply theories and principles of learning mathematics to plan appropriate instructional activities for all students. At the completion of this professional development module, future and current educators should be able to differentiate and explain the sixth level of Bloom's taxonomy, elaborate on how to incorporate Bloom's taxonomy into their lesson planning and curriculum development, and demonstrate the ability to develop assessment tools and rubrics that align with Bloom's taxonomy levels. Bloom's taxonomy is a renowned framework in education developed by Benjamin Bloom and a group of educators in the 1950s. It classifies learning into a hierarchy of cognitive skills, providing educators with a structured approach to set learning objectives, design curriculum, create assessments, and plan instruction. It emphasizes the importance of moving beyond the rote memorization, fostering higher-order thinking skills such as analysis, evaluation, and creativity. Bloom's taxonomy serves as a valuable tool for educators seeking to enhance the quality and the effectiveness of education. The original taxonomy comprises of 6 levels: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. The primary goal of Bloom and his colleagues was to create a classification system that could help educators plan and assess the learning outcomes of their students. The original taxonomy was presented in the 1956 publication Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, the Classification of Educational Goals, which was a 2-volume work. The taxonomy was designed to guide teachers in creating more effective instructional methods and assessments. Let's take a look at those original cognitive levels. At knowledge level, recalling, recognizing information, concepts, or principles is involved. This level forms the basis for higher level thinking. At comprehension level, learners demonstrate their understanding of the materials by explaining, interpreting, and summarizing it. At application stage, students use their acquired knowledge and comprehension to solve problems and apply what they have learned in new situations. While doing analysis, learners break down complex information into its component parts and examine the relationship between them. Synthesis involves creating something new by combining different elements, ideas, or concepts. It often includes problem solving and creative thinking. At the highest level of evaluation, learners assess the quality, value, or effectiveness of ideas, arguments, methods, or materials. They make judgment based on established criteria. In 2001, Anderson and Krathwohl revised Bloom's taxonomy to make it more applicable to the 21st century and to account for changes in education and technology. The revision included the following changes. Remembering corresponds to Bloom's knowledge level. Understanding corresponds to Bloom's original comprehension level. Applying corresponds to the Bloom's application level. Analysis is like Bloom's analysis level. Evaluating includes aspects of Bloom's synthesis and evaluation levels. Creating emphasizes the ability to generate new ideas and concepts, which is a higher order cognitive skill. The revised taxonomy emphasizes the importance of creativity and critical thinking in modern education. Bloom's taxonomy, developed by Benjamin Bloom in the 1950s, was the result of an effort to address issues related to educational assessment and instruction. The taxonomy was created to improve the quality and effectiveness of education and to provide educators with framework for classifying and organizing educational objectives and outcomes. Several factors and needs led to the development of Bloom's taxonomy. At the time of its development, there was a growing awareness that traditional forms of assessment, for example multiple choice tests, were limited in measuring the full range of student learning. Bloom aimed to create a more comprehensive and systemic approach to assessment. Educators needed a framework to connect learning objectives, assessment methods, and instructional strategies more effectively. Bloom's taxonomy offered a way to align these elements, making education more coherent and goal-oriented. Bloom recognized that the importance of cognitive development in students and aimed to provide a structure for educators to address higher-order thinking skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity beyond basic knowledge acquisition. The taxonomy was also developed to support curriculum design. It allowed educators to systematically plan and sequence content and activities to ensure that the students progressed from basic understanding to more advanced cognitive skills. The development of Bloom's taxonomy aimed to standardize learning objectives across educational institutions and to provide a common framework for educators to articulate their goals. Bloom's taxonomy supported the emerging concept of individualized instruction, where students could progress at their own pace through a curriculum structure to align with their cognitive development. The taxonomy drew upon principles from educational psychology, particularly Jean Piaget's theory on cognitive development and the learning stages. The taxonomy has since become a widely accepted framework for educators, providing a way to design curriculum, set learning objectives, create assessments, and develop instructional strategies that encourage higher-level thinking and learning. It has undergone revisions over the years, with the most recent revision being Bloom's digital taxonomy, which adapts the framework for the digital age and technology-enhanced learning. Here is a comparison of the original and the revised taxonomy. We can see that the revised taxonomy uses verbs to identify the levels, whereas the original taxonomy used nouns. We can also see that the synthesis level has been replaced by create and has been moved to the very bottom of the list, which is actually the top of the pyramid, showing higher order thinking skills. In Bloom's taxonomy, remembering is the lowest level of cognitive skills and represents the foundational step in the process of learning and understanding. At this level, learners are primarily focused on recalling or recognizing information, facts, or concepts that they have previously encountered. Remembering involves the ability to retrieve information from memory without necessarily comprehending or applying it. It is a crucial building block for higher order thinking skills and learning. Some of the tasks and activities associated with the remembering levels typically include recalling, retrieving, recognizing, listing, and labeling. Here are some of the verbs that are connected with those tasks and activities. Recalling usually includes list, name, identify, define, state, recite, recognize, match, and label. To ask students to retrieve information, use verbs such as retrieve, find, and locate. When asking students to recognize, use verbs such as recognize, detect, point out, distinguish, select, spot, and pinpoint. When you want to ask students to list information that they have memorized, ask them with verbs such as inventory, catalog, specify, and enumerate. When asking students to label information, use verbs such as tag, categorize, classify, place into categories. It is important to note that while remembering is the lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy, it provides the foundational knowledge necessary for more advanced cognitive processes. In educational settings, remembering is often the starting point for building a deeper understanding of a subject. Once learners can remember and recall essential facts and concepts, they can then move on to higher levels of thinking, such as comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, as outlined in Bloom's taxonomy. Following are some questions associated with remember level in different subject areas. In mathematics, ask questions such as, what is the formula for calculating the area of a rectangle? Can you recall the multiplication table for number 7? Name the geometric shapes with 4 sides of equal length. What is the value of pi to 2 decimal places? List the prime numbers between 1 and 20. Similarly, in science, you may ask, identify the 4 fundamental forces in physics. Name the planets in our solar system in order of their distance from the sun. What is the chemical symbol for water? List the 3 states of matter. What are the basic components of an atom? In language arts, you can assess students' ability to remember and recall information by asking questions such as, what is the definition of a simile? Name the main characters in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. Can you recite a famous Shakespearean sonnet? List 3 synonyms for the word happy. What is the past tense of verb run? In history, questions such as, who was the first president of the United States? List some of the major events of the American Civil Rights Movement. What year did World War II end? Identify the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. List 3 important figures of the Renaissance. Can be used to assess students' ability to recall information. In social studies, examples of remember level questions are, what are the 3 branches of the United States government? Name the neighboring countries of Canada. Identify the continents of the world. What is the purpose of the United Nations? List the Bill of Rights in the United States. In arts, ask questions such as, recall the primary colors in art. Name the famous work of art by Leonardo da Vinci. What is the definition of chiaroscuro in painting? Can you identify the art movement associated with Picasso? List 3 different art materials used for sculpting. In music, you may ask, name the 4 families of musical instruments in an orchestra. What is the treble clef used for in sheet music? List the names members of musical band Beatles. Identify the four main voices in a choir. What is the purpose of a metronome in music? In Bloom's taxonomy, understanding is the second level of cognitive skills and represents a more advanced stage of learning compared to remembering. At this level, learners not only recall or recognize information, but they also demonstrate comprehension and the ability to make sense of the material. Understanding involves interpreting, explaining, and clarifying the meaning of facts and concepts that have been memorized or recalled. This level of cognitive skill goes beyond mere rote memorization and encourages students to grasp the significance and relationships of the information they have learned. Tasks and activities associated with the understanding level typically include interpreting, which requires explaining in your own words what a metaphor is, interpreting the meaning of a historical document or a poem, or describing the main idea of a complex scientific concept. Exemplifying requires students to provide examples to illustrate a given concept or a principle, give specific instances of when a particular mathematical theorem can be applied, or share real-world examples of supply and demand in economics. The student can be asked to summarize a text or passage to capture its main points and essential details. Provide a summary of historical events or periods. Summarize the key elements of a scientific theory. Students can also be asked to compare and contrast two different literary works or characters. Identify similarities and differences between two historical figures, and compare the advantages and disadvantages of different economic systems. At the understand level, students can also be asked to explain or paraphrase a complex sentence or passage in their own words, restate a mathematical problem in a different way while preserving its meaning, and explain a scientific theory using simpler language. Some examples of verbs that can be used to ask students to interpret include clarify, simplify, decode, translate, and offer analysis. To exemplify, use verbs such as illustrate, give an example of, demonstrate, and instantiate. To ask students to summarize, use verbs such as outline, abstract, condense, abstract, and generalize. Comparing can be achieved by using verbs such as contrast, map, match, and connect. Finally, to ask students to explain, use verbs such as describe, interpret, clarify, elaborate, and paraphrase. Here are some examples of understand level questions for language arts. Explain the central theme of the novel you just read. Describe the character's motivation and how they drive the plot. What is the author's purpose in using symbolism in this poem? In history, describe the causes and effects of a particular historical event. Explain the significance of the Declaration of Independence in American history. How did the Industrial Revolution impact society during the 19th century? In science, you can ask questions such as describe the process of photosynthesis and its importance to plant life. Explain the principles of scientific method and how it is used in research. How do ecosystems work, and why is biodiversity important? In mathematics, explain the concept of fractions and how they relate to division. Describe the properties of a parallelogram and how they differ from a rectangle. What is the Pythagorean theorem, and how is it used in geometry? In social sciences, Describe the key features of a democratic government and how it differs from other forms of governance. Explain the concept of cultural relativism in anthropology. Describe the economic factors that contribute to inflation in an economy. In technology, explain how encryption works and why it is important for cybersecurity. Describe the basics of computer programming and the role of algorithms. Outline the key principles of responsive web design and their importance in web development. In Bloom's taxonomy, apply is the third level of cognitive skills and represents the ability to use previously acquired knowledge and understanding in new and practical situations. At the apply level, learners are expected to take what they've learned and apply it to solve problems, make decisions, or complete tasks. This level of cognitive skill focuses on the practical and real-world application of knowledge and concepts. Tasks and activities associated with the apply level typically include problem solving, where students apply mathematical concepts to solve real problems, or use scientific principles to conduct experiments and analyze results, or apply critical thinking skills to address complex issues in various domains. Application involves application of historical knowledge to analyze a current event, using language skills to write a persuasive essay or analyze a text, applying engineering principles to design and build a working model. Students also utilize procedures and techniques, applying a specific method or procedure to accomplish a task, such as conducting a laboratory experiment or following a set of instructions, or utilizing programming techniques to write code that achieves a specific goal. Students also experience transfer of knowledge, where application of knowledge and skills learned in one context to a different but related context are applied. Students transfer problem-solving strategies from one domain to another. Finally, students apply real-world applications. Students apply acquired knowledge in practical scenarios, such as in a professional setting, to make decisions and solve problems. Some verbs associated with problem solving include solve, calculate, determine, resolve, find solutions. Verbs associated with application include use, implement, employ, execute, and demonstrate. Verbs associated with utilizing procedures are operate, manipulate, perform, carry out, and manage. For transfer of knowledge, use verbs such as calculate, figure out, quantify, and estimate. For real-world application, use construct, create, build, design, develop, and formulate. The apply level encourages learners to go beyond the theoretical or abstract understanding of concepts and use them in practical and meaningful ways. This level often requires critical thinking and the ability to adapt and use knowledge in diverse situations. It is a crucial step in cognitive process as it prepares learners for problem solving and decision making in real-life contexts. Here are some examples of apply level questions. In mathematics, you have a rectangular garden with a known area. If you want to maximize the garden's perimeter, what are the dimensions of the garden? Given a real-world problem involving percentages, calculate the final price of a discounted item, including tax. You are planning a road trip, and you need to determine the optimal route based on the mileage and time constraints. How would you approach this problem using mathematical concepts? In science, ask questions such as, a chemistry experiment involves mixing specific quantities of chemicals to create a reaction. What volume of each substance should be combined to achieve the desired reaction? In biology, you're given a set of experimental data and asked to draw conclusions about the effects of different variables on plant growth. In physics, you need to calculate the speed and angle required for a projectile to hit a specific target. In engineering, ask questions such as design a bridge that can support a certain load while adhering to given budget constraints. You're tasked with optimizing the layout of a manufacturing plant for maximum efficiency and productivity. How would you approach this problem? In literature, ask questions such as analyze the characters' motivations and decisions in a novel, considering how their actions impact the story's outcome. Given a literary text, discuss how the author's use of foreshadowing contributes to the development of the plot. You are asked to adapt a classic work of literature into a modern setting while preserving its thematic elements. How would you approach this adaptation? In business and economics, ask questions such as analyze a company's financial statements and recommend strategies for improving profitability and reducing costs. Design a marketing campaign for a new product, considering target demographics, pricing, and distribution. You're a manager dealing with a complex workplace issue. Develop a plan to address the problems and improve employee morale and productivity. In history, ask questions such as, given a historical event, analyze its causes, effects, and broader historical context. Create a timeline that highlights key events in a specific historical period and explains their significance. Compare and contrast the approaches of different leaders during a critical time in history. In Bloom's taxonomy, analyze is the fourth level of cognitive skills, and it involves a deeper and more complex mental process than the previous levels of remember, understand, and apply. At the analyze level, learners are expected to break down information, concepts, or ideas into their component parts, examine the relationships between these parts, and draw meaningful conclusions based on their analysis. This level requires critical thinking and the ability to explore the underlying structures and patterns within the subject matter. Tasks and activities associated with the analyze level typically include patterns and trends, differentiating, organizing, breaking down, and examining relationships. Verbs associated with patterns and trends include recognize, identify, examine, observe. Verbs used with differentiating include discriminate, distinguish, list, and test for. To ask students to organize, use verbs such as categorize, classify, group, and sort. For breaking down structures and complex ideas, use verbs such as dissect, divide, decompose, itemize, and anatomize. For examining relationships, use verbs such as discover, inspect, survey, scan, and question. Analyze requires a higher level of cognitive engagement because it involves a more in-depth exploration of the subject matter and often necessitates the ability to make connections between various elements. It's about understanding the underlying structure and logic of a topic, identifying key components, and using critical thinking to draw meaningful conclusions based on the analysis. This level is an important step towards developing problem-solving and decision-making skills. Here are some examples of analyze level questions. In literature, ask, dissect the plot structure of the novel and evaluate its impact on character development. Scrutinize the symbolism employed in a short story and its contribution to the story's themes. Break down the author's use of foreshadowing in the play and assess its effect on the audience's interpretation. In history, investigate the catalysts for a historical event and assess their significance in its occurrence. Examine the geopolitical factors leading to a specific conflict and evaluate their long-term consequences. Uncover the motivations behind a significant political decision and evaluate its historical repercussions. In science, analyze the experimental procedures in a scientific study and evaluate their effectiveness in yielding meaningful data. Investigate the cellular processes involved in a biological phenomena and assess their importance in the overall organism. Deconstruct a chemical reaction mechanism, identifying the key intermediates and evaluating their roles. In mathematics, evaluate the steps in a complex mathematical proof and determine its validity and rigor. Investigate the applications of a mathematical concept in real-world scenarios and assess its practical implications. Examine the patterns in a series of mathematical sequences and deduce the underlying principles governing them. In business and economics, dissect the financial strategies employed by a successful business and assess their impact on profitability. Scrutinize the economic indicators of a region and evaluate their influence on investment opportunities. Investigate a business case study and analyze the ethical considerations in decision making. In social sciences, examine the qualitative data in a sociological study and assess the recurring themes and patterns. Break down the cultural norms of a society and evaluate their effects on individual behavior. Investigate the historical events leading to a political revolution and analyze their social and economic consequences. In Bloom's taxonomy, evaluate is the fifth level of cognitive skills. Students demonstrate the ability to make informed judgment, critically assess information, consider significance of ideas and concepts. Students also engage in critical review and case studies. The tasks involved in evaluating include checking, judging, critiquing, justifying, and recommending. When asking students to check, use verbs such as assess, appraise, evaluate, measure, determine. For judging, use verbs such as choose, decide, compare, determine, mark, and prioritize. When asking students to critique, use verbs such as criticize, disprove, scrutinize, and rate. When asking students to justify, use verbs such as support, defend, prove, disprove, and provide evidence for. And finally, when asking students to recommend, use verbs such as rate, choose, prioritize, compare, provide opinion, and value. Here are some examples of evaluate level questions. In literature, ask questions such as evaluate the effectiveness of the author's use of symbolism in a novel to convey deeper meaning and themes. Critically assess the impact of a character's actions on the story's outcome and the development of other characters. Compare and contrast the themes and narrative styles of two different authors and argue for the superior literary merit of one over the other. In history, ask questions such as critically assess the historical accuracy and bias in a primary source document from a specific time period. Evaluate the long-term consequences of a major historical event and argue whether it had a more positive or negative impact on society. Compare and contrast the leadership styles of two historical figures and argue which one had a more significant influence on the course of history. In science, ask questions such as evaluate the validity and reliability of data collected in a scientific experiment and suggest improvements to the methodology. Assess the ethical considerations of conducting a specific scientific study and argue whether it should be pursued. Compare and contrast two competing scientific theories and provide evidence for which one is more robust and widely accepted. In mathematics, critically assess a mathematical proof for a particular theorem, pointing out any flaws or gaps in logic. Evaluate the applicability of a mathematical concept to real-world problems and argue for its effectiveness in solving practical issues. Compare and contrast two different mathematical modeling techniques and argue for the superiority of one in specific context. In business and economics, evaluate a company's business strategy and financial performance, making recommendations for its improvement. Assess the social and environmental impact of a specific business practice or industry and argue whether it should be regulated. Compare and contrast two economic theories and argue which one offers a more effective solution to address contemporary economic challenges. In social sciences, ask questions such as critically analyze the ethical considerations of a social research study and argue whether it should proceed. Evaluate the effectiveness of a psychological therapy approach in treating a specific mental health condition and provide recommendations. Compare and contrast two sociological theories explaining a social phenomena and argue for one that provides a more comprehensive understanding. In Bloom's taxonomy, create is the highest level of cognitive skills, representing the ability to generate new ideas, concepts, or products by combining and reorganizing existing knowledge and skills. It involves not only applying and synthesizing knowledge from lower levels, but also demonstrating a high degree of originality and creativity. At the create level, learners are expected to go beyond simply analyzing, evaluating, or applying existing information and ideas. They are required to produce something entirely new, whether it's a novel solution to a problem, an innovative design, a piece of art, or a unique concept. This level encourages learners to think outside the box, take risks, and develop their own contributions to a field of study. Tasks and activities associated with the create level include generating original ideas, which requires developing innovative solutions to complex problems, designing new products, artworks, or concepts that didn't previously exist, crafting original hypotheses or theories based on existing knowledge, designing new products, developing new techniques, problem solving, and expressing creativity, which requires creating art, music, literature, or other forms of creative expression. It also involves writing original stories, poems, or essays, or designing new products, structures, or systems. Works associated with generating original ideas include develop, design, theorize, imagine, make up, and brainstorm. Use verbs such as construct, create, develop, invent, design, and make when asking students to design new products. When encouraging students to develop new techniques, use verbs such as propose, compile, improve, maximize, modify, plan, generate, and conceptualize. When engaging students in creative problem solving, use verbs such as plan, solve, devise, engineer, innovate, formulate, and construct. When asking students to express creativity, use verbs such as decompose, design, paint, photograph, draw, play, illustrate, and choreograph. Here are some examples of create level questions. In science, devise an original experiment to explore a scientific hypothesis or phenomenon, outlining the methods, variables, and expected outcomes. Construct a novel technological device or solution to address a real-world problem, detailing its design and functionality. Formulate a fresh ecological model to simulate the interactions within a specific ecosystem and apply it to make predictions. In literature, compose a short story, poem, or play that delves into a unique theme or concept, elucidating the literary techniques employed to convey your message. Invent an entirely new character for a novel, delineating their personality, background, and role in the story. Craft a script for a play or screenplay, encompassing dialogue, scenes, and stage directions. In mathematics, propose a new mathematical theorem or conjecture, furnishing a rigorous proof or logical argument to substantiate it. Engineer a mathematical model to address a complex real-world problem, such as optimizing supply chains or forecasting market trends. Construct an original set of mathematical puzzles or challenges to assess problem-solving skills. Art and design. Ask questions such as, produce a piece of artwork, painting, sculpture, digital art, that communicates a specific theme or emotion, and elucidate your artistic choices. Devise a fresh logo, poster, or branding concept for a business or organization, rationalizing your design elements. Blueprint an innovative architectural or interior design plan for a building or a space, providing rationale for your selections. Business and entrepreneurship. Elaborate a business plan for a new startup company, encompassing market research, financial projections, and a marketing strategy. Generate a unique product or service concept that addresses an unmet consumer need, presenting a business proposal for its launch. Engineer a marketing campaign for a product, outlining the advertising, social media, and promotional strategies. In education instruction, ask questions such as, design a comprehensive curriculum or training program for a specific subject or skill comprising lesson plans and assessments. Create an interactive educational game or simulation to facilitate learning in a particular field, explaining its educational value. Develop a fresh teaching method or approach that enhances student engagement and understanding, outlining its implementation. Bloom's taxonomy has been used widely in education for decades and has proven to be a valuable tool for educators. However, it is not without its share of criticism and limitations. Some common criticisms include rigidity of hierarchy. One of the primary criticisms is the perception that the hierarchy implies a rigid, linear progression in learning. Critics argue that learning is often more complex and fluid than the taxonomy suggests, with students frequently using multiple cognitive skills simultaneously. Simplistic classification. Some argue that the taxonomy's 6 categories oversimplify the complexity of cognitive processes. Real-world thinking often involves a blend of skills and may not neatly fit into a single category. Overemphasis on cognitive skills. Critics suggest that Bloom's taxonomy places too much emphasis on cognitive skills at the expense of other essential dimensions of learning, such as affective and psychomotor skills. Difficulty in classification. Determining the appropriate level of taxonomy for a particular learning objective can be challenging. The classification of a task or question into a specific level can be subjective and may vary among educators. Inadequate attention to creativity. Some argue that the taxonomy doesn't give enough weight to the development of creativity and innovation, which are increasingly important in the modern world. Cultural and contextual biases. Critics note that the framework was developed in a Western educational context and may not fully accommodate diverse cultural and educational settings. And finally, inflexibility for digital and technology-based learning. In the digital age, where learning often occurs in non-linear and interactive ways, the taxonomy may not readily apply to emerging forms of education and technology-enhanced learning. Despite these criticisms, Bloom's taxonomy remains a valuable resource for educators. While it has its limitations, it provides a structured framework for setting learning objectives, designing curriculums, and developing assessments that promote critical thinking and higher-order cognitive skills. Educators often adapt and combine elements of the taxonomy with other instructional models to create more flexible and comprehensive approach to teaching and learning. Bloom's taxonomy has been a valuable educational tool for many years, but it has not been without controversy. Some of the controversies and debates surrounding Bloom's taxonomy include simplistic categorization. One major controversy revolves around the hierarchical and categorical nature of the taxonomy. Critics argue that it oversimplifies the complexity of cognitive processes and that learning does not always follow a linear progression. Real-world thinking often involves a blend of skills, making it challenging to neatly categorize into discrete levels. Another controversy surrounds around the lack of empirical evidence. Some critics contend that there is limited empirical evidence to support the specific ordering of the cognitive skills in the hierarchy. The original taxonomy was developed based on the expert opinion of Bloom and his colleagues, rather than rigorous empirical research. Cultural and contextual biases. Bloom's taxonomy was created in a Western educational context, and some argue that it may not adequately address the diverse cultural and contextual factors that influence learning. It may not be universally applicable to all educational settings and cultures. Inflexibility for diverse learning styles. Critics argue that taxonomy may not effectively accommodate diverse learning styles and preferences. Some students may excel in different areas or have unique cognitive strengths that aren't fully accounted for in the taxonomy. Another controversy surrounds the overemphasis on cognitive skills. Some argue that Bloom's taxonomy places too much emphasis on cognitive skills and doesn't sufficiently address affective, emotional, and psychomotor, physical domains of learning, which are also essential for a well-rounded education. It is also contended that Bloom's taxonomy is inadequate for digital and technology-based learning. Educators can address the controversies surrounding Bloom's taxonomy and make the best use of this framework by taking the following approaches. Understand the framework's purpose. Educators should recognize that Bloom's taxonomy is a tool designed to guide and inform, not restrict or prescribe. Understanding its purpose as a framework for setting learning objectives and promoting higher-order thinking can help alleviate concerns about the rigidity. Educators should recognize that no single educational framework is universally applicable. Educators can adapt Bloom's taxonomy to fit their specific context and needs. It can be combined with other instructional models or frameworks to create a more flexible and comprehensive approach to teaching and learning. Educators should emphasize a holistic view of learning. Encourage a holistic perspective on education that encompasses not only cognitive skills but also affective and psychomotor domains. This helps address concerns about an overemphasis on cognitive skills. Educators should focus on learning outcomes. Place more emphasis on the intended learning outcomes and goals rather than rigidly adhering to specific categories within the taxonomy. The focus should be on what students need to learn and how to help them achieve those objectives. Educators should incorporate diverse learning styles, recognizing that students have diverse learning styles, strengths, and preferences. Educators should modify teaching strategies to accommodate these differences and provide opportunities for students to excel in various areas. Educators should integrate technology and digital learning, update and adapt taxonomy to accommodate technology-enhanced learning and digital resources. Recognize that in the digital age, education often involves interactive and non-linear approaches. Educators should embrace revisions and adaptations. Acknowledge that revisions and adaptations of Bloom's taxonomy have been made over the years to address changing educational needs. Educators can choose to use the original taxonomy or updated versions based on their preferences and requirements.